Dear friends, this is Salil here. As I promised, this is supplementary to lecture 1 on kinematics. Out here I deal with all the mathematical details which connect the variables which deal with the motion of particle.
Well, this is supplementary to first lecture on kinematics. Here in this lecture, I deal with the mathematical tools which connect the kinematical variables like displacement, velocity, acceleration, distance, and speed. Differentiation and integration are two such fundamental tools. So I discuss differentiation and integration to the extent they are required for the purpose of kinematics. The first thing that need to understand for understanding differentiation is the notion of slope. Let's take a common example. Let us say that this is the level of the road and this is the level of parking in your house. Of course, the houses are raised from the road level so that the rainwater cannot get in. How will you park the car here? You can't lift the car and put it over there. You ask a construction worker to make a structure like this so that you can drive in the car to the level of parking. You call it slope. Slope may be a word for you, but it has mathematical meaning. If the horizontal distance that it has occupied on the road is this, so we call it run, and the vertical gap between the level of parking and the road we call as rise. Then slope is defined as, which is shown by symbol m, as rise upon run. This difference in the level of the parking and the road, and of course the horizontal span of the structure. We can show this in the diagram as we normally show it in the diagram like this. We make a small horizontal line and vertical line and write beside it the symbol m to denote that it is slope. Can you see that if this angle is theta, which is making with the road, this structure, then this rise upon run is nothing but perpendicular upon base. So which you know from the trigonometry is tan theta. Tan theta. So slope can also be interpreted as tan theta. And theta is the angle that the structure is making with the horizontal road. In a more formal manner, the notion of slope can be understood by coordinate geometry. If I take x and y axis, right, and there are 2 points in the coordinate plane, you can call it x1 y1 and x2 y2. Let's say this is x1 y1, this point is x1 y1, this coordinate is x1, this coordinate is y1, and there's another point which may be this, you can call it x2 y2, x2 y2. If I draw a horizontal line to denote the gap between the two x coordinates, then the slope of this line segment which are joining these 2 points, this, can be got by taking the ratio of rise upon run. And what is the run here in this case? Can you see that the run is nothing but x2 minus x1? This gap is run, which is x2 minus x1. x2 minus x1, is it? And this is the rise, which is y2 minus y1. It is easy for you to confirm that, I guess. Can you see that if I take the ratio of the two, that is rise upon run, then I get the slope. The slope here, which is shown by symbol m, is nothing but rise upon run, which is y2 minus y1 upon x2 minus x1, which can also be written as delta y upon delta x, because you know it very well, delta stands for change in. So y2 minus y1 is change in y, x2 minus x1 is change in x. That's why the slope can be written as, delta y upon delta x. We can also infer the slope in a slightly different manner, in the sense that if I produce this to meet with the x-axis, and let's say this line is making angle theta, this angle is theta with the positive x-axis, then corresponding angles are equal. That's why this angle will also be theta. So can you confirm that this is perpendicular upon base delta y upon delta x? That's why again the slope can be written as tan theta. So this is the concept of slope. Let us apply the concept of slope to an example. Let's say in a cricket match, you have the runs versus over graph for your team, and this looks like this. A wicket fell when there were, let's say, over was O1, which could be 12th over, and now number of runs that time were R1 is equal to 57. Now your favorite partnership, the two batsmen are favorite. Again, the partnership was broken when it was 27th over were bowled, that is O2 27, and then the scorecard was R2, which was 150. We want to compute the efficiency of run making for this partnership. What do you compute then? Of course, you compute the rate of run making, that is, average rate of change of runs per over, that you call as run rate. How do you compute that? You compute it as number of runs made, that is R2 minus R1 upon number of over bowled, O2 minus O1, which is 150 minus 57 upon upon 27 minus 12, which is 6.2. Can you see that this can be interpreted in yet another manner? Can't you see that same is the slope of this line, which is line joining these two? What is this line all about? Well, this line is called secant. Let me draw it separately and show you here. If there is a curve, any curve for that matter, maybe you have this curve, then any line that pierces the curve, which cuts the curve at two different points, is known as secant. And any line that meets the curve at two coincident points, that is, this is meeting the curve possibly at two coincident points. So this is called tangent. So these are the two notions, secant and tangent. Secant cuts any curve at more than one point, whereas tangent cuts a curve at two coincident points, that is, it touches the curve. So can't you see that this blue line is the secant to my run versus over curve? So this can be written as slope of the secant. That is average rate of change of runs per hour, which I am wanting to find the rate of change, is nothing but equal to slope of the secant. So this is very important notion, and you please correlate it. That is average rate of change of any variable with respect to other is nothing but equal to slope of the secant. This is a very important notion. Also notice that if I produce this up till x-axis, and this makes an angle theta, right? Then the same would be nothing but tan theta. So what the point that I was trying to drive home here was very important, and that is the average rate of change is nothing but equal to slope of the secant. If we generalize the notion we just discussed, so let's say that there is a variable y which is varying with x. It could be anything, right? So if we want to find the average rate of change of y with respect to x, like run with respect to over y with respect to x. So let's say that we have one point on this as x1, y1. This point may be x1, y1, and another point on this as x2, y2. Maybe this, okay, x2, y2. So this is my x1, sorry, this is my x1, this is my y1, this is x2, and this is y2. Okay. If I want to compute the average rate of change of y with respect to x between these 2 points, so what do we get? We get this as equal to y2 minus y1 upon x2 minus x1, because if I draw a line joining these two, so this would be the run. Will it be or not? This would be the run, x2 minus x1, and this would be the rise, that is y2 minus y1. So thus, this is what it is. So this is the average rate of change of y with respect to x, which can be also written as, of course, delta y upon delta x. What is this equivalent to geometrically? Can't you see that from the earlier discussion that if I join these 2 points, so this is the secant. Isn't it the slope of the secant? So this is slope of the secant. So average rate of change of y with respect to x is slope of the secant. And as we did earlier also, if I produce this up till the x-axis so that it makes an angle theta with the x-axis, the same thing can be written as equal to tan theta. The point that I'm trying to drive home is, understand this very carefully, I'll box it, that is the average rate of change of any variable with respect to other variable is slope of the secant. This is what I want to highlight here, right? Well, let us discuss something without giving the heading for the time being. We'll give the heading later on. Let us say let us again copy the same curve. Again repeat the process that I want to find the rate of change of y with respect to x between two different points. Maybe the points are again this and this, right? And as you know that this would be, if I draw horizontal line over here, so this would be run, which can be written now as delta x, and this can be written as delta y, right? You know that if I ask you to find the average rate of change, then you will say that it is nothing but delta y upon delta y upon delta x. Hold on. I want to do something here. I want to keep this point fixed, x1, y1. And bring this point x2, y2. Bring this point x2, y2 nearer and nearer to x1, y1 on this curve. That is, from this position, I want to bring it nearer along the curve and nearer and nearer and nearer and nearer, finally very close to x1, y1, but not at x1, y1, but very close to. How close? Well, answer is very diplomatic. The answer is as close as it may please you. So what would be the gap between these 2 points finally? The gap between these 2 points will not be 0, but it will be very small. How small? Very small. If I ask you what is the smallest real number, positive real number, what would be your answer? Will you say it is 0.1? No, 0.01 is smaller than that. But somebody may say 0.001. It is smaller than even that. So that is why there is no limit to the smallest number that you can think of. So that is why it is very close, smallest gap between these 2 points, whatever you can think of. Finally, what I'm doing is I'm bringing these points nearer and nearer and nearer and nearer to this. So my journey is something like that. I'm moving along the curve nearer and nearer and nearer and nearer and nearer, but not at the first point. The second point is brought very close to the first point. Let me undo that. So what I have done in the process is I have been traveling along the curve, and thus both my delta x and delta y are becoming smaller and smaller. Can you see that? Can you see that as the point 2, x2, y2 moves closer to x1, y1, my delta x and delta y both will decrease. Both will decrease. So this is how it will go. Will it? Right. Both will decrease. What is happening to the secant in the process? Can you see that secant which was initially here now is rotating. It is finding this position, then this position, and then this position, and likewise. So what is the closest position? The closest position is very small. So we express this information as limit. We express this information as limit delta x tending to 0. Can you see that delta x is the gap between x1 and x2? When delta x is tending to 0, this is read as limit delta x tending, not equal, tending to 0. So remember this very carefully. This symbol means limit delta x tending to 0. In the limiting case, when my delta x is becoming very small, but not zero. Because if it becomes zero, then denominator would be zero, which is a mathematical sin. You can never divide by number zero. Zero can never come in the denominator. That's why it is not equal to zero, but it is becoming very close to zero. Okay, having said that, so if I write the symbol here, it is just a symbol which denotes that delta x has become very small, then this acquires a shape. What? This acquires the shape what is known as dy by dx. Dy by dx. Why? Because d is supposed to be, delta is supposed to be change in the variable. So d is supposed to be very small change in the variable. D means infinitesimal change. So d is infinitesimal. Infinitesimal is opposite of infinity. Infinity is very large. The infinitesimal is very small. Very small. From delta, what is delta? Delta means change in the value. Delta is finite change. So d is very small change, that is infinitesimal change. Very small change. So for very small change in x, which can be shown here, for very small change in x upon very small change in y upon very small change in x is what is represented by dy by dx, and it is said to be what is known as differential coefficient of y with respect to x. This is called differential coefficient of y with respect to x, and this is what the notion of derivative is. This is what differentiation is. This process of computing this is known as differentiation. What heading should we give to it? Of course, since my delta is becoming d, that is from finite change, we are going to very small change. That's why the heading that we should give to it is instantaneous rate of change of y with respect to x. When the change was finite, it was average rate of change. So when the change is very small, this is the change in y, So should we call it instantaneous rate of change or not? So basically, what the point is that instantaneous rate of change is equal to differential coefficient of the variable y with respect to x. This is the point I want to drive home. And this is also known as derivative, that is differential coefficient of y with respect to x is known as derivative of y with respect to x. And the process of computing that is known as differentiation. So this is one of the processes in calculus. The second process, of course, is integration. If I see what happens to this secant when my delta x tends to 0, remember one thing very clearly. It is not only delta x alone which is becoming very small. No, not at all. Together with delta x, even the delta y is also becoming very small. We are not writing although, but when the point moves nearer and nearer and nearer and nearer and nearer to the first point, can you see that x is also decreasing from this much bit? It has become this much, this much, this much, this much, this much, this much, and in a similar manner, y is also decreasing. That is, delta y is decreasing from this to this, this to this, from here to here, from here to here, and finally from here to here. So thus both are becoming small, and finally just check out what happens to the secant. Can't you see that as the point comes closer and closer and closer and closer, this would become what? Won't this become, that is, tangent to the curve? Can you see this very clearly? It would become the tangent to the curve at the point x1, y1, right? So we get to see that is from slope of the secant in the case of average rate of change. In the instantaneous rate of change, it has become from the slope of the secant to slope of the tangent. So from slope of the secant, it becomes slope of the tangent. And if this angle is theta, which I'm writing here, then of course the same thing will be equal to tan theta. Will it be equal to tan theta or not? The point that I wanted to drive home was this. Again, notice here carefully, that is the instantaneous rate of change of any quantity with respect to other is differential coefficient of that quantity with respect to other, which is nothing but slope of the tangent in their curve. This is what I want to highlight here, and notice it carefully. Now, if the relationship between y and x is given to us, which is represented by the curve, then differential coefficient can be got. And there are certain formulas for differential coefficient. For example, if let me just write the first formula. For example, if y is equal to constant may be equal to c, then it is said that dy by dx is equal to 0. It is convenient to understand if it is constant, then it would be a horizontal graph. Could you understand this? That is, if I make a small graph over here, so you can see that this is my x, this is my y, and the graph will look like something like this. So can you see that if my y remains constant at c, the tangent to this curve always would be horizontal, and that is why it will be making angle 0 with the x-axis, and that is why this dy by dx is equal to 0 for it. But we'll not go into the details of these formula, because that is a task which is normally done in maths. One more that I can tell you here is that is if y is equal to x raised to the power n, where n may belong not only natural number, but n may belong to real number. It could be decimal number or anything like that. Then dy by dx is given by, then dy by dx is equal to my n x raised to the power n minus 1. That is, the power comes in front of it, gets multiplied, and the power is reduced by 1. For example, if y is equal to x raised to the power 8 by 3, let's say, then my dy by dx would be equal to, that is differential coefficient or derivative, whatever you call it. There are several names for it. My dy by dx would be equal to 8 by 3. Power comes and multiplies in front of it, right? And x raised power 8 by 3 minus 1 becomes the power, which is nothing but 8 by 3 and x raised to the power 5 by 3. This is how it is. Now, how do you get this formula? This you'll learn in the maths class, in 11th maths class itself, in the later part of it. There is a chapter devoted to this, right? So for the time being, this set of formula, the other formula which you can look into any book, and they will be useful for finding the differential coefficient. So that is what is the differentiation all about. Having discussed differentiation, now we go over to integration. Well, integration is of two different kinds. The first is indefinite integration, also known as antiderivative, and the other is known as definite integration. Let's understand this notion the notion of indefinite integration, which is also antiderivative, with the help of an example. Let's say that y is equal to x raised to the power 8. If I ask you what is dy by dx, then you'll say that this is equal to 8 x raised to the power 7. From this rule, you can see the rule. dy for x raised to the power n, dy by dx is n x raised to the power n minus 1. So this becomes 8x raised to the power 7, which can also be written as d by dx. Notice it carefully, of x raised to the power 8 is equal to 8 x raised to the power 7. Notice here carefully that this d by dx is, truly speaking, a symbol which shows that the quantity which is written after that is being differentiated. The differential coefficient is being obtained. So this is the operator. So this is what is the differentiation process. So we'll understand that d by dx is a symbol which differentiates the quantity which is written after this. So I can write in different way as when x raised to the power x is differentiated, I get 8x raised to the power 7. Is there any way I can get x raised to the power 8 from 8x raised to the power 7? That is from here to here, this arrow. That has to be a process which is inverse of the differentiation process. This process to retrieve my x raised to the power 8 from 8x raised to the power 7 has to be some kind of inverse of this d by dx process. And precisely this process is known as integration. So differentiation gives you from x raised to the power 8 to 8x raised to the power 7. So it's inverse process which is that's why it is called antiderivative. So it's inverse process which is should be written as indefinite integration. Good enough. So inverse process will give me back x raised to the power 8. So integration is the inverse process of differentiation. Now, symbol for differentiation is d by dx. That is, you can see here, when I operate d by dx upon anything, then it gives me the differential coefficient. That's why symbol for differentiation is d by dx. Likewise, symbol for integration is integral dx. This is basically elongated s. If you elongate s, then what do you get? If you elongate s, you get a symbol like this or not? So this is what is elongated s. You can see again, this is my s. If I elongate it, so I get a symbol like this. So this is basically elongated s and dx written over here. So this forms part of the symbol integral dx, and whatever is to be integrated has to be written here within the elongated s and dx. There's no problem about it at all. Like square root is a symbol. When you square root some number, it gives me the square root of that. This is a symbol for a square root. Likewise, these two are the symbol for differentiation and integration. So if this information is translated in mathematical symbol, that is when x raised to the power 8 is differentiated, it gives you 8x raised to the power 7, meaning that it can be written as d by dx of x raised to the power 8 is equal to 8x raised to the power 7. So the same information can be written in a vice versa manner, that is from here to here, as what? Integral 8x raised to the power 7, 8x raised to the power 7 dx. This is how. So can you see that these two are the part of the symbol, this elongated s and dx. They have only ceremonial role. The main thing is written between them. So whatever is to be integrated is written between these two symbols. So this integral 8 raised to the power x 7, 8x raised to the power 7 dx, that is this process, is nothing but what? You can see that it is gonna be equal to x raised to the power 8. Now you must have been convinced about it. That is, integration is nothing but retracing process. That is, if I differentiate something and I want to get back whatever was the original thing, then I need to integrate this. So integration is the inverse process of differentiation. Well, the constant can be taken out of integration, it does not take part in it. That's why 8 comes out. And like the rule of cross multiplication, and this 8 will go down here in the denominator and will make integral x raised power 7 dx is nothing but x raised power 8 upon 8. Now, well, for the sake of completeness, we add a constant c, which can have any value over here for the sake of completeness, and it is known as integration constant. That is why the integration is called indefinite integration, because c can be given any value. Why it is so? Remember that in the original shape, if there would have been a constant c also added to x raised power 8, then would it matter in differentiating? Because when it is differentiated, the derivative of c would have been 0 anyway, because you know that differentiation of a constant is 0. Agree or not? And thus, the addition of a constant here would not have affected the differential coefficient at all. So that is why when it is integrated, so writing it integration constant c is not a problem at all. So that is why integration constant can be added to this, and we can say that this is the complete answer to integration. So likewise here also c can be added. Now, let me give you a general formula. One of the general, there are many, but there's one of the general formula. That's integral x raised power n dx, where n belongs to real number, may not be natural number, is equal to x raised power n plus 1 upon n plus 1, and of course plus integration constant. Only restriction is that is n should not be equal to minus 1. Why? If n is equal to minus 1, then denominator will become 0, and it is not allowed to divide by 0, as I told you already. So let me box it, and this is a very important formula which would be very frequently required to be used in physics. Okay, and you can see the application of this formula here as well. Can you see that x raised power n, here n is 7, here n is 7. So what should be the answer? 7 plus 1, x raised power 7 plus 1 upon 7 plus 1. Can you see that x raised power 8 upon 8 is the answer? So this is what is the confirmation of this formula. N cannot be minus 1, but n can be any other real number. It can be decimal, fraction, any other thing except minus 1. Let's come to the second kind of integration, and the second kind of integration is what is known as definite integration. And remember this, the difference lies in the fact that there are two limits, a lower limit and an upper limit attached to the indefinite integration to make it definite integration. And its value is antiderivative, which is indefinite integration computed at the upper limit, minus indefinite integration computed at the lower limit. Let's take an example. Let us say that I need to compute integral x cube dx, and I attach two limits also to make it definite integration. Now see the difference. This is the indefinite integration, but if I attach two limits, let's say 2 and 3, then this becomes any two numbers, any two real numbers, then it becomes definite integration. So this will be written as box x raised power 4 upon 4, y 4 upon 4. Can you see that n plus 1 upon n plus 1 rule? That is integral x raised power n dx is x raised power n plus 1 upon n plus 1. 3 plus 1 is 4, 3 plus 1 is 4, plus integration constant. Now, uh, now you write lower limit here and upper limit here. Now, this means that I compute this antiderivative indefinite integration at the upper limit and minus at the lower limit. So what I do is I compute it at the upper limit, so it gives me 3 raised to the power 4 upon 4 plus c. Does it or not? Minus. Remember this minus. Minus at lower limit. At lower limit, it is 2 raised to the power 4 upon 4 plus c. Can you see how unimportant is c now? That is why I said that it is only a formality. For the sake of completeness, I wrote here. Can you see that in the difference taking process, the c will get neutralized and I'll get what? I'll get 81 upon 4 minus 16 upon 4, which is 65 by 4. So integration constant is only important in the antiderivative or indefinite integration. It gets neutralized when we finally compute the definite integration.